Assessing the top 5 China Belt and Road Initiative projects, a comprehensive threat analysis for U.S. interests. Introduction. Launched in 2013, China's Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) has emerged as a critical component of its foreign policy, aiming to enhance global trade through extensive infrastructure investments across over 140 countries. While the BRI positions itself as a pathway for economic development and connectivity, it simultaneously raises significant concerns regarding U.S. interests and global geopolitical stability. This report provides a comprehensive analysis of the top 5 BRI projects, evaluating their implications for U.S. interests through a lens of threats posed by China's strategic maneuvers. Key BRI projects and their implications. 1. China-Pakistan Economic Corridor (CPEC). The CPEC is one of the most ambitious projects under the BRI, entailing an investment of approximately $62 billion. It aims to connect China's western provinces to the Arabian Sea via a network of highways, railways, and pipelines. The Gwadar Port, a pivotal component of CPEC, holds strategic significance for both economic and military purposes. Threat analysis. Geoeconomic competition. The CPEC enhances China's footprint in South Asia, undermining U.S. influence in a region critical for its strategic partnerships, especially with India. Military implications. The dual-use capabilities of Gwadar Port may facilitate military operations, allowing China to project power in the Indian Ocean, thus challenging U.S. naval dominance. 2. Hambantota Port, Sri Lanka. The Hambantota Port, developed with a $1.3 billion loan from China, became a focal point of concern when Sri Lanka defaulted on the loan, resulting in a 99-year lease to China. Threat analysis. Debt trap diplomacy. This case exemplifies the risks associated with BRI projects, where nations become economically beholden to China, compromising their sovereignty. Strategic control. China's control over the port provides it with a strategic foothold in the Indian Ocean, raising alarms for U.S. maritime interests. 3. Kyaukphyu Port, Myanmar. As part of the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor, Kyaukphyu Port is designed to facilitate trade between China and the Indian Ocean, reducing reliance on the Strait of Malacca. Threat analysis. Regional stability. The development of this port may exacerbate tensions in the region, particularly with India, which views the initiative as a threat to its sphere of influence. Supply chain vulnerability. Control over this port enables China to affect trade routes, potentially disrupting U.S. supply chains and logistics in Asia. 4. China-Laos Railway. The China-Laos Railway is a key infrastructure project aimed at connecting Kunming in China to Vientiane, the capital of Laos, enhancing trade connectivity within Southeast Asia. Threat analysis. Influence over Southeast Asia. This railway strengthens China's economic ties with Laos and other Southeast Asian nations, potentially diminishing the U.S. influence in the region. Economic dependence. As Laos increasingly relies on Chinese investment in infrastructure, its political autonomy may be compromised, aligning its interests more closely with Beijing. 5. China-Thailand High-Speed Railway. This project aims to link Bangkok with Kunming, facilitating rapid transport and trade between Thailand and China. Threat analysis. Strategic connectivity. This high-speed railway enhances China's connectivity in Southeast Asia, furthering its ambitions to dominate regional infrastructure. Challenges to U.S. policy. The project undermines U.S. efforts to counter Chinese influence in ASEAN countries, which may lead to a recalibration of regional alliances. Common themes across projects. Geoeconomic competition. The BRI is strategically designed to reshape global trade routes and enhance China's economic leverage over participating nations. By establishing critical infrastructure, China can dictate terms of trade and access, thereby diminishing U.S. market influence. Debt trap diplomacy. Several nations involved in the BRI have succumbed to unsustainable debt levels, raising concerns about their sovereignty and ability to resist Chinese pressure. This phenomenon not only jeopardizes the political landscape in these countries but also poses a direct challenge to U.S. interests in maintaining a rules-based international order. Risks to U.S. allies. The expansion of the BRI presents a direct threat to U.S. allies, particularly in Europe and the Indo-Pacific. Countries such as India and Japan view the BRI as an encroachment on their strategic interests, potentially leading to increased regional tensions and a realignment of alliances. U.S. policy responses. Multilateral cooperation. A coordinated U.S. strategy emphasizing multilateral cooperation with allies is essential to counteract the influence of the BRI. By enhancing infrastructure investments in developing countries, the U.S. can provide viable alternatives to Chinese financing, fostering economic growth without the strings attached. Strategic communication. The U.S. must effectively communicate the risks associated with BRI projects, including issues of sovereignty, corruption, and economic dependency. A robust narrative highlighting the adverse impacts of Chinese investments can sway public opinion and encourage countries to seek alternatives. Infrastructure investment. The U.S. should prioritize infrastructure investments in strategic regions, particularly in Asia and Africa, to address the growing demand for development. By leveraging partnerships with countries that share similar values, the U.S. can create a competitive environment for investment that counters the BRI. Enhancing domestic capacity. Investing in domestic industries and technological innovation will strengthen the U.S. position in the global supply chain. By fostering a resilient economy, the U.S. can better compete with China's economic strategies and reduce reliance on Chinese manufacturing. Conclusion. The Belt and Road Initiative represents a significant challenge to U.S. interests and global stability. The strategic implications of key BRI projects underline the need for a comprehensive U.S. response that emphasizes multilateral cooperation, strategic communication, and infrastructure investment. By addressing the vulnerabilities exposed by the BRI, the U.S. can mitigate the risks associated with China's growing influence and promote a more balanced international order. The Belt and Road Initiative BRI poses significant challenges to U.S. interests globally, particularly through its strategic infrastructure projects and economic influence. A comprehensive threat analysis reveals several counterintuitive insights that underline the complexities of the initiative and its implications for U.S. foreign policy. 1. Debt trap diplomacy versus mutual economic benefit. The common narrative surrounding the BRI emphasizes debt trap diplomacy, wherein China allegedly ensnares countries in unsustainable loans to gain control over critical infrastructure. However, many nations participating in the BRI view these investments as crucial for their economic development. This presents a paradox. While the U.S. and its allies perceive these loans as a threat to sovereignty, the recipient countries often see them as necessary for addressing infrastructure deficits and promoting economic growth. This divergence complicates the U.S. strategy, as simply condemning the BRI may not resonate with countries that prioritize immediate economic benefits over long-term sovereign concerns. 2. Regional infrastructure needs versus Chinese influence. Analysts note that the BRI addresses a pressing need for infrastructure investments in developing nations, a gap that the U.S. has often neglected. While the U.S. perceives China's influence through the BRI as a strategic encroachment, it overlooks the fact that many of these nations might not have viable alternatives for infrastructure financing. This creates a counterintuitive situation where the U.S. must balance acknowledging these countries' needs with counteracting the growing influence of China. If the U.S. fails to offer competitive alternatives, it risks further entrenching China's position in these regions. 3. Strategic partnerships and alliances. The BRI's expansion has sparked concerns among U.S. allies, particularly in Europe and the Indo-Pacific, about China's growing influence disrupting regional stability. However, the BRI has also prompted some countries to reassess their relationships with both the U.S. and China. For instance, Japan and India have expressed concerns over China's expansionism but have also recognized the potential for collaboration with the U.S. to create alternative infrastructure initiatives. This presents an opportunity for the U.S. to strengthen ties with allies and develop a cooperative approach to counterbalance the BRI rather than viewing it solely as a unilateral threat. For the military implications of infrastructure control, the BRI's infrastructure projects, particularly ports like Gwadar and Hambantota, have raised alarms regarding potential dual-use capabilities that could enhance China's military power projection. However, this concern is counterbalanced by the reality that many of these countries are wary of becoming overly reliant on China for military support. As these nations grapple with their own security concerns, there is a possibility that they may seek a more balanced approach, engaging with both China and the U.S. This duality raises questions about whether the U.S. should focus on military countermeasures or leverage diplomatic engagement to foster security partnerships that align with these countries' interests. 5. U.S. economic strategy in global competition. The BRI's emergence has been positioned as a challenge to the existing liberal international order. Nevertheless, the U.S. has often reacted by emphasizing military solutions or diplomatic isolation of China. A more counterintuitive approach would involve recognizing the BRI as a catalyst for U.S. economic strategy reform. By investing in infrastructure and development initiatives in key regions, the U.S. can offer tangible alternatives to the BRI, thus appealing to nations seeking economic growth without the strings attached to Chinese investments. This strategic pivot from a purely defensive posture to one that addresses the underlying economic needs of these countries could redefine the U.S.'s role in international relations. In conclusion, the BRI represents a multifaceted challenge to U.S. interests that extends beyond the surface-level concerns of debt diplomacy and geopolitical encroachment. Recognizing the counterintuitive dynamics at play, such as the necessity of infrastructure investment for developing nations, the potential for strategic partnerships, and the need for a revised U.S. economic strategy, can inform a more nuanced and effective response to China's ambitious initiative. The U.S. must navigate this complex landscape by balancing its strategic interests with the legitimate economic aspirations of nations engaging with the BRI. In the comprehensive threat analysis of the top 5 Belt and Road Initiative BRI projects regarding U.S. interests, several critical aspects may be overlooked by many readers. Here are the significant points that warrant attention and explanation of their importance. 1. The long-term geopolitical shift. While the immediate financial implications of BRI projects such as debt trap diplomacy are often discussed, the long-term geopolitical shift that BRI represents is frequently underappreciated. The BRI is not just about infrastructure investment, it is a strategic endeavor aimed at reshaping global power dynamics in favor of China. The establishment of Chinese infrastructure across multiple continents could lead to a new world order where U.S. influence wanes. This is significant because it affects not just economic relationships but also military alliances, technological standards, and global governance structures, potentially isolating the U.S. from key international decision-making processes. 2. The role of state-owned enterprises (SOEs). The involvement of Chinese SOEs in BRI projects is often mentioned but not fully explored in terms of their implications for global economic competition. These companies operate under the direct influence of the Chinese Communist Party (CCP) and often prioritize strategic benefits over profitability, distorting free market principles. This could lead to monopolistic behaviors in vital sectors and create dependencies in recipient countries that limit their sovereign decision-making. The strategic use of SOEs can undermine U.S. companies in international markets, leading to a significant imbalance in competitive fairness. 3. The weaponization of infrastructure. The narrative of infrastructure as a tool for development often glosses over its potential use as a weapon for coercive diplomacy. Control over critical transport nodes like ports can allow China to exert influence over trade routes and supply chains, effectively holding economic power over countries that have accepted BRI investments. This strategic advantage can be leveraged in times of conflict or diplomatic strife, where China may prioritize its interests at the expense of U.S. allies. The implications extend beyond mere economic competition, they represent a fundamental challenge to U.S. national security interests. 4. The impact on U.S. allies and partnerships. The BRI's influence on U.S. allies, particularly in Europe and the Indo-Pacific, is often underestimated. The initiative creates a divide within alliances as countries weigh the immediate economic benefits of Chinese investment against the long-term strategic implications. Nations like Italy and Hungary have already signed agreements with China complicating unified responses to Chinese aggression. This fragmentation could weaken NATO and EU cohesion, making it harder for the US to forge a collective strategy against rising Chinese influence. 5. The challenge of alternative investment strategies. The analysis stresses the need for the US to provide alternatives to BRI financing. Yet the feasibility and effectiveness of these alternatives are frequently overlooked. The U.S. historically has not matched China's aggressive investment strategy in developing regions, and merely proposing alternatives without a robust plan may not be enough. The success of any U.S. strategy will depend on the ability to mobilize resources, build trust with partner nations, and present an attractive vision that counters the immediacy and allure of Chinese investments. 6. Technological standards and regulatory influence. The BRI's expansion facilitates China's ability to set international technological standards, which is a vital aspect that is often sidelined. By embedding Chinese technology in infrastructure projects globally, China can influence the regulatory landscape in ways that favor its companies and geopolitical interests. This could lead to a world where Chinese standards dominate, marginalizing U.S. technology firms and undermining the competitive edge of American innovation. 7. Environmental and social implications. While the economic and strategic implications of BRI are frequently debated, the environmental and social impacts are less emphasized. Many BRI projects have been criticized for their lack of sustainability and disregard for local communities. As global awareness of environmental issues grows, projects that fail to adhere to sustainable practices can lead to backlash against China and potentially offer the U.S. an avenue to promote its values of sustainable development as a counter-narrative. 8. The role of information warfare. The BRI is not only an economic initiative but also a tool for information warfare. China's narrative around the BRI emphasizes win-win cooperation, but the realities of debt and dependency are often obscured. The U.S. needs to engage in a robust information campaign to counteract this narrative, highlighting the risks and pitfalls associated with BRI projects. This aspect is crucial in shaping public perception and governmental decision-making in participating countries. 9. Potential for local pushback. The growing discontent within BRI partner countries, as evidenced by protests and calls for alternative investments, is an area that may be overlooked. This local pushback against unfavorable loan conditions and projects that do not align with national interests can provide leverage for the U.S. to offer alternatives and build stronger alliances. Understanding this dynamic is essential for the U.S. to capitalize on existing dissatisfaction with Chinese investments. Conclusion. In summary, the BRI's implications extend far beyond economic investments and debt relationships. The initiative represents a strategic maneuver by China to reshape the global order, presenting multifaceted challenges to U.S. interests. Recognizing and addressing these nuanced threats is essential for developing a coherent and effective U.S. response to counter the growing influence of China through the BRI. The overlooked elements discussed above can inform policy decisions and strategic planning that aim to safeguard U.S. national interests in an increasingly competitive global landscape. For most valuable points for in-depth analysis and discussion on the Belt and Road Initiative BRI and U.S. interests. 1. Geo-economic competition and the alternative global order. The BRI represents a strategic challenge to U.S. interests by promoting an alternative global order that diminishes U.S. influence. This initiative has the potential to reshape international trade and economic norms, allowing China to expand its geopolitical footprint. The implications of this competition are profound as nations that align with the BRI may find themselves increasingly dependent on China, potentially leading to a shift in the balance of power. In-depth analysis can explore how the U.S. can respond to this challenge not just through military means but by developing its own economic and diplomatic strategies to maintain influence in key regions. 2. Debt trap diplomacy and sovereignty issues. China's approach to infrastructure financing often results in debt trap diplomacy, where host countries become ensnared in unsustainable debt obligations, leading to loss of sovereignty over critical infrastructure. The case of Sri Lanka and the Hambantota Port serves as a cautionary tale highlighting the risks involved for countries engaging with the BRI. A comprehensive discussion can consider the ethical implications of such practices and the potential for international frameworks that safeguard countries from predatory lending practices. Additionally, analyzing how the U.S. and its allies can offer viable, sustainable alternatives for infrastructure investment could form a crucial part of the conversation. 3. Strategic infrastructure and military implications. The construction of strategic infrastructure such as the Gwadar Port in Pakistan raises concerns about dual-use capabilities that could enhance China's military reach. This situation not only threatens U.S. allies in the Indo-Pacific but could also alter regional security dynamics in ways that challenge U.S. military operations and interests. An in-depth analysis could examine the military and strategic implications of BRI projects, including how they could be leveraged by China for strategic military advantages. This could also involve a discussion of U.S. military strategy, including deterrence measures and alliances in response to these developments. 4. U.S. policy responses and multilateral cooperation. Given the multifaceted challenges posed by the BRI, a coordinated U.S. response is essential. This includes promoting multilateral cooperation among allies to provide alternatives to BRI financing, as well as investing in infrastructure projects that uphold democratic values and sustainable development. Discussion can focus on how the U.S. can leverage its existing alliances and institutions such as the World Bank and IMF to counteract the influence of the BRI. Furthermore, exploring the importance of narrative and perception in soft power, particularly in the context of addressing concerns among nations about dependency on China, can enrich the dialogue on how to effectively engage with developing countries. These 4 points present critical avenues for discussion regarding the implications of China's Belt and Road Initiative for U.S. interests. Exploring both the risks and opportunities that arise in this evolving geopolitical landscape. 1. The Marshall Plan 1948–1952. The Marshall Plan was a U.S.-sponsored program to aid Western Europe in economic recovery after World War II. It aimed to prevent the spread of Soviet communism by stabilizing the economies of European nations through financial assistance, thereby promoting political stability and economic growth. Similar to the Belt and Road Initiative BRI, the Marshall Plan involved substantial investments in infrastructure and aimed to foster economic interdependence, though it was rooted in a context of post-war recovery rather than expansion of influence. 2. The Berlin Airlift 1948–1949. In response to the Soviet blockade of West Berlin, the United States and its allies initiated the Berlin Airlift to supply the city with essential goods and prevent it from falling into communist control. This operation demonstrated U.S. commitment to containing the spread of communism and maintaining influence in Europe, paralleling concerns about China's BRI as a vehicle for expanding its geopolitical reach and influence in developing nations. 3. The United States Open Door Policy 1899. The Open Door Policy aimed to ensure equal trading rights for all nations in China and prevent any one power from monopolizing the Chinese market. This policy was driven by the U.S. desire to secure economic interests in Asia and to counter European colonialism. It reflects similar themes present in the BRI, where China seeks to expand its economic influence through infrastructure investments and trade partnerships, raising concerns among other nations about sovereignty and market access. Future outlook, predictions for the Belt and Road Initiative and U.S. interests. As the Belt and Road Initiative (BRI) continues to evolve, its implications for global geopolitics, economic dynamics, and U.S. interests will become increasingly pronounced. The following predictions outline key developments likely to emerge over the next decade. 1. Expansion of geoeconomic influence. China's BRI will likely expand its geoeconomic influence significantly, particularly in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America. This expansion will challenge U.S. economic hegemony as countries in these regions increasingly turn to China for infrastructure financing and development. A growing reliance on Chinese investment will lead to deeper economic ties, potentially diminishing U.S. market access and influence in these areas. Prediction: by 2030, China may solidify its position as the leading economic partner for many developing nations, effectively reshaping global trade routes and economic dependencies. 2. Increased debt diplomacy and sovereignty concerns. The concept of debt trap diplomacy will continue to be a significant issue as countries struggle to repay BRI loans. This may lead to more instances where China gains control over strategic assets such as ports and infrastructure due to defaults on loans. Nations like Djibouti and Sri Lanka could serve as cautionary tales for others considering participation in the BRI. Prediction: by 2028, at least 5 more countries may find themselves in situations similar to Sri Lanka, resulting in long-term leases or control of critical infrastructure by Chinese entities, further raising sovereignty concerns among regional powers. 3. U.S. policy shift towards multilateralism. In response to the BRI's growing influence, the U.S. is expected to adopt a more proactive and multilateral approach in its foreign policy. This may include strengthening alliances with European and Indo-Pacific partners to counterbalance China's economic clout. Initiatives like the Build Back Better World B3W framework could emerge as viable alternatives to BRI projects emphasizing sustainable infrastructure investment. Prediction: by 2025, the U.S. will likely launch a comprehensive strategy that includes at least 3 major multilateral infrastructure initiatives aimed at providing competitive alternatives to BRI financing. 4. Technological competition and standards setting. China's technological ambitions, particularly in telecommunications and AI, will be a focal point of the BRI. The initiative will likely be leveraged to promote Chinese technology standards, globally challenging U.S. dominance in tech markets. The U.S. may respond by investing in R&D and forging partnerships to establish its own technological standards. Prediction: by 2030, the competition between U.S. and Chinese tech standards will intensify, potentially leading to a bifurcation in global technology ecosystems, with countries forced to choose sides. 5. Emerging regional powers and new alliances. Countries initially aligned with the BRI may begin to reassess their partnerships as the downsides of Chinese loans become evident. Regional powers like India and Japan may seek to bolster their own influence through alternative investment strategies, creating a more multipolar global landscape. Prediction: by the end of the decade, a new coalition of countries advocating for infrastructure development outside of Chinese influence may emerge, comprising India, Japan, and several ASEAN nations, thereby reshaping regional dynamics. Conclusion: the future of the Belt and Road Initiative will undoubtedly pose both challenges and opportunities for U.S. interests globally. As China's influence grows, it will be crucial for the U.S. to adapt its strategies, focusing on multilateral cooperation, sustainable investments, and technological innovation to effectively counterbalance the BRI's reach. The next decade will be pivotal for establishing a new order in international relations, one where economic partnerships will define geopolitical alignments.